So since we did a couple with the parameter plugin, let's do another one using a different data pool plugin affecting the parameters again. So to begin, again, we're going to go into the scene settings, the plugin, and we'll go into our built-ins, into the scene plugins, and drag our data pool plugin into the scene settings plugin folder. We're going to go back into the geometry, and let's, for this example, use any type of geometry. How we can just use the cylinder. How about? So we'll group this. And if you want to give it a color and whatever, we'll rotate it and scale it up a little bit. We can do that as well just to see it a little bit better. We're going to go into the container plugins, into the data folder. This time we're going to use a data pool plugin called Multi Parameter. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this onto the group, not the actual cylinder itself. I'm going to go ahead and click on the Multi Parameter plugin here. And in the field name, again, we can give it anything. I'm just going to call it par for short for a parameter. Now, in this particular plugin, we have an option here. It says use other container. If I turn that on, what we get is another drop down here. It says which. We have a parent, a grandparent, great grandparent, or remote. Anytime I see something like this, I always tend to go for the remote. And when you turn on the remote on, then it opens up another parameter here. It says remote container. Anytime you see a box like this, it really means that it's waiting for a container, as it says here. So what we're going to do is drag this cylinder container right into that area here. Now I need to know certain parameters names. So again, if we go into the cylinder, we have these different parameters here. So we have things like angle, corners, hole. So these are things that we're talking about when it comes to the multi-parameter. Before we actually fill in those parameters by themselves, we actually need to tell it what type of geometry this is. So we're going to go ahead and type in geometry just to tell it that it is geometry, then what type, which is a cylinder, and now we need to know which parameter we want to affect. So let's do the angle first. If we come over here and click and drag, it tells us the angle's name here, which is angle, small case. So we're going to go back into the multi-parameter and type in angle. Now down at the very bottom we have this thing called a separator. By default it gives you a value. You can change that if you want, or you can leave it the same. I'm just going to use a backslash for this. So now I'm going to go into the scene settings, and our field name was par. So in the scene settings I can just write par equals 100, and you can see how that affects the angle of it. Now if you want to keep adding parameters, what we need to do is come back into the multi-parameter plugin here. Again, we're going to type our geometry and then which type it is. And this time, let's affect, if we go back into the cylinder, instead of the angle, we can do corners. So if I click and drag, it gives us the name corners. I'll go back into the multi-parameter and type in corners right here. And when we go into the scene settings, since this is our separator, the backslash, I'm going to come into the scene settings, type backslash, and let's give it the amount of corners of 3. So you can see when I type in 3 how it affects that cylinder. If we want to smooth it out, we can add more. So we can type in 100 and it smooths out that cylinder. So let's do one more. We'll go back into multi-parameter. Again, we'll start by typing in geometry. And we'll say the same thing since it is the cylinder. This time we'll go back into the cylinder, and let's say we'll do the hole. So if I click and drag, it tells us the name of the hole here. So I just need to go back into the multi-parameter plugin and we'll type in hole. Now we'll go back into the scene settings. Again, we'll add our separator with a backslash, and we can enter the number amount for the hole. We'll enter a number of 67, which is just a random number. You can see how it affects that cylinder there. So this is the multi-parameter, and a way to affect multi-parameters within one geometry type.